this? This sucks. Oh, man. All right, Crunch, do you have realistic goals? Are you missing your family? Are you actually not seeing them and you're starting to realise that I haven't seen, like, my kids in days and this is really terrible, and did you realise that that was happening? It's an important thing to realise and kind of be introspective and think about, is this actually going on? Stress. Stress is an interesting topic. It's obviously a huge problem. It leads to depression, anxiety, autoimmune disorders, reproductive issues. Like, it's actually incredible how powerful stress can be. Stress, as I mentioned earlier, is caused by an actual physiological process. It's the release of cortisol and other stress hormones from a gland just above your kidneys. And that hormone has an effect on every different system in your body. In small doses, that's fine. In large doses, it can cause all sorts of problems, some of which are emotional. As you can imagine, it can make people pretty damn sad and pretty stressed out, lonely, overwhelmed, irritable. It also has cognitive effects. It can impair memory, can impair concentration, can cause you to be more pessimistic and make poorer decisions, can actually affect judgment. There are behavioural responses. I particularly like that picture because it's a doggy. But stress affects sleep, it affects eating, it affects the way that you interact with your social life. So people tend to get withdrawn. They might use alcohol or drugs. They might start avoiding their responsibilities. And there are physical side effects. Stress actually leads to pain, can cause palpitations, fast heart rate, can cause nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and other bowel disturbances, sexual dysfunction, where you just don't want to have sex anymore, and can actually make you sick, can give you colds and flus and things like that. Let me bring this over here. Oh. And it's interesting that stress actually has two different causes, or two different branches of causes. Lots of people don't realise this. Lots of people think that stress is completely external. I'm stressed because I'm being forced to do this much work. I'm stressed because there's this big change in my life. I'm stressed because my relationships are breaking down. But there's actually internal causes of stress as well. Like people who worry a lot about things can get a lot more stressed than other people, even if what they're worrying about wouldn't make another person stressed out. Put two people in the same situation, one who has chronic worry and one who doesn't, they will have different levels of stress, and that is measurable in the blood. People who have like very rigid thinking, like they're not able to kind of think outside the box or problem solve, they need other people to come in and help them to really reassess problems, they struggle a lot with stress problems. And similarly, people who have very like black or white thinking, like all or nothing, like this is either going to be great or it's going to completely fail, and they lose the shades of grey in between. You can imagine how that kind of catastrophizing would lead to increased levels of stress and anxiety. There's something called automatic negative thoughts. Lots of people get them. They're the sort of thoughts that are like, you don't look good today, or you're not clever enough to be there. People who are more susceptible to those automatic negative thoughts and they don't challenge them, increase levels of stress. And also people who are perfectionists as well can get way more stressed out than people who are less obsessive about the quality of their outputs. Burnout's something that I talk a lot about and is really important in the games industry. And it's unfortunate that it's kind of still something that we need to talk about because it doesn't seem to be understood all that much by tech as an employer yet. And I think that's probably because they're not unionised. But burnout's real, and it's not just being tired or stressed out. It's actually a state of being where, as well as all the symptoms of stress, you can start to feel completely depersonalised, like you're not real anymore, like what you're doing is not real, just completely cynical and detached. And there's a feeling of, I'm not good enough. And if I'm not good enough and what I'm going to produce isn't good enough, then what's the point of doing it? Like, why even bother? So you can become really, really apathetic, losing enjoyment in things. And as you can imagine, that obviously leads to reduced productivity of the employee. And there's a kind of snowball effect. Because burnout can be caused by reduced resources and low team morale, if one person in a team is burned out, therefore everyone in the team is going to get burned out because one person's not pulling their weight anymore and everybody else has to pick up the slack, and it just gets worse and worse. It's not dichotomous. You're not burned out or not burned out. And it's funny, actually, when I first wrote an article about burnout, I was looking down at all the symptoms and I was like, hey babe, am I burned out? And he's like, yeah, you have been for a long time. I'm like, oh, I didn't realise until I read this list. You can be a medical professional and not even realise, because I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't looking in, I wasn't inspecting, I just wasn't thinking about it, I was just cracking on. It's very easy to lose sight of where you are on that spectrum of really good or really burned out, and the fact that you don't need to be all the way at one end before you start doing something about it to push yourself back out again. It costs Australia $14 billion a year, burnout. It's huge. It's absolutely mind-blowing how much money this costs the economy. And it's not something that I've just made up. It's not just a term that we've been throwing around to excuse bad work morals and bad work ethics. This is something that's measurable. We've actually put people into functional MRI scanners and looked at their brains when they've got the symptoms of burnout, and there's been shown to be reduced connectivity between the amygdala, which is this lizard brain thing right in the middle, and your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that controls decision making. And there's reduced neurons firing between the two, which means that people can't make decisions quickly anymore. When they are making decisions, they're probably not making the right ones. And their emotional ability to regulate the way that they're behaving in response to their emotions is actually reduced. So they can become really irritable, quite anxious, tearful. And it's not a choice, it's literally something that's going on in the brain. And it can get to the point of having a diagnosable mental illness. Be aware that the symptoms of depression are not just feeling sad. I talked about this comic yesterday. I think it's really powerful, and I think it explains really well what having depression is like. That it's not just being low, you can actually just feel nothing, just deadening nothing. And there are heaps of physical symptoms: reduced concentration, reduced motivation, just not being able to do anything. And it's not because you don't want to, it's just because you physically can't. There is no energy anymore. People become very apathetic, they can be irritable, not eat, not sleep. So if you're experiencing a few of these symptoms and then you're feeling, well, I'm not depressed because I'm not sad, maybe go and talk to a doctor, talk to a healthcare professional, talk to your friends. Perhaps there is depression going on, you just don't know. Anxiety is the other common one that I want to talk about, because between anxiety and depression, they account for the vast majority of mental illness, particularly in our age group. And anxiety is the insidious one. Anxiety is the one that people write off as being normal, particularly in tech culture. Being anxious and perfectionistic and obsessive is labelled as genius, or being like a hard worker or diligent, whereas actually it could just be eating away at you from the inside. And it's not just being shy or being worried all the time. It can present in a variety of ways, including being irritable, avoiding responsibilities, getting very tired easily, having things like obsessions and compulsions, which is obviously OCD, or having very low self-esteem and poor self-belief. And in case you were thinking that anxiety is not a problem because it doesn't really lead anywhere, there is a significant rate of suicide for anxiety disorders, because it's exhausting. It's being in that fight or flight response all the time, day in, day out, and people get to a point where they're like, I just can't do this anymore, this is ridiculous. So it's important to have a think, am I experiencing these symptoms? Have I been just ignoring it, or maybe even not aware that it was happening? I told you I would try to put some light-hearted things in here because this is so heavy. What effects can these sorts of problems have on the team? As I said when we were talking about burnout, it can be like very self-perpetuating. So one person gets a mental health problem and then suddenly everyone else is feeling that as well. Stress is contagious. We all know that. Like if someone's anxious, everyone else in that room is going to get anxious really quickly. It's very, very, very contagious. And a really good way of thinking about it is that the team is not individual units, it's the sum of its parts. And if there is an illness in one of those parts, there's going to be an illness in the whole thing. So think about your team. Are there lots of little disagreements? Are you finding it hard to produce what you're supposed to be producing? Are you feeling tense, not enjoying going to work, getting there and still feeling isolated even though you're surrounded by people? Is it because you're a bad team? Or is it because someone in the team has a mental health issue that needs to be addressed? And have you missed the opportunity to do that? Or have you missed that opportunity numerous times? And what could you do at this point to be like, hey, Nala, I'm going to nip this in the bud? And we also have to talk about the effects outside the team because, of course, life exists outside of your game dev world, funnily enough. Mental health issues very strongly correlating with drug and alcohol use, which in problematic levels can be a mental health problem in itself. Can cause arguments and tension at home with your significant other or the kids or your mum and dad, your friends. You might not be spending time outside of work or home anymore. If you get to a point where you're like, geez, I actually haven't seen anyone but my flatmate and my colleagues for 6 months. Probably time to have a think about what's going on for you and how you could amend that. We all love playing games. That's probably why we're working in them. Probably got a whole bunch of other hobbies as well. Has it gotten to the point where you're like, I just can't be bothered to do anything? Like, I used to find this fun and I don't anymore. One of the more insidious signs that there could be a mental health issue is diet. And I think that that's because it's a sign of apathy. We all know that poor diet leads to significant health problems later in life. So why are we allowing ourselves to eat really poorly day in, day out? Macca's should be a treat just at the weekend, or it is for me. But are you perpetuating this habit where you're just eating poorly every day? And why are you doing that? Is it because you want the bad food, because you don't have time to cook, or is it because you don't give a shit about your body anymore? Same with sleep. Sleep's so important. It's like my favourite thing to do of all time. How could you be getting more? Or less, if that's the problem? And have you thought about sleep and how important it is? And how you could possibly amend it? So we've done the inspecting. We've thought about all of the different things that could be going wrong or right, how to think about ourselves as a person, how to think about ourselves as an employee, as a member of the game community, and now we're going to accept. Here's cheese slide number 1. So this is, I'm not allowed to move, am I? Jeez. This is from Pokemon Black and White, I think, and I really like this quote. It's more important to master the cards you're holding than to complain about the ones your opponent was dealt. And I think that that's a really powerful way of looking at health and mental health specifically, because it's not going to go away and it's not going to change unless you just accept that it is what it is and that you have the power to do something about that. So we're going to do a mindfulness exercise. Is everyone up for that? Yeah? Sweet. Mindfulness is an old Buddhist practice that is on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmental. And the power of that is that... Oh dear, I don't want this. the power of that is that you are able to just, even for 5 minutes, just be who you are, where you are, how you're feeling, and be completely non-judgmental about that and just accept that it is what it is. So this is one of my favourite ones because it's short and I find this lady's voice very relaxing.
So find a relaxed, comfortable position, seated on a chair or on the floor, on a cushion. Keep your back upright, but not too tight. Hands resting wherever they're comfortable. Tongue on the roof of your mouth or wherever it's comfortable. And you can notice your body from the inside. Noticing the shape of your body, the weight, touch. And let yourself relax and become curious about your body. Seated here, the sensations of your body, the touch, the connection with the floor or the chair. Relax any areas of tightness or tension. Just breathe, soften. And now begin to tune into your breath in your body. Feeling the natural flow of breath. Don't need to do anything to your breath. Not long, not short, just natural. And notice where you feel your breath in your body. It might be in your abdomen, it may be in your chest or throat, or in your nostrils. See if you can feel the sensations of breath, one breath at a time. When one breath ends, the next breath begins. Now, as you do this, you might notice that your mind may start to wander. You might start thinking about other things. If this happens, this is not a problem. It's very natural. Just notice that your mind has wandered. You can say thinking or wandering in your head softly. And then gently redirect your attention right back to the breathing. So we'll stay with this for some time in silence, just a short time. Noticing our breath, from time to time getting lost in thought and returning to our breath. See if you can be really kind to yourself in the process. And once again, you can notice your body, your whole body seated here. Let yourself relax even more deeply. And then offer yourself some appreciation for doing this practice today. Whatever that means to you. Finding a sense of ease and well-being for yourself in this day.
Okay. How's everyone feeling? Pretty relaxed? All right, wake up now. Time for the good stuff now. So now we're going to learn how to act on everything that we've just talked about. Or at least to start to think about the ways that we could act on it. Now that we've looked in, we thought about who am I, what are my strengths, my vulnerabilities, how does that interact with what I have to do on a day-to-day basis? And then you've just accepted that and been like, well, that is me, and that's okay. How can we now intervene or change our behaviour to improve our own mental health and well-being and to flourish? Some more cheese? I think that's Max Payne. The genius of the whole, no matter how long you spend climbing out, you can still fall back down in an instant. I think that's really important to realise, and it's why my 3-step model is a loop, that everything in mental health is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's just the way it is. And it's absolutely okay to struggle, even though you thought you were doing really well. If you've put like heaps of stuff in place and you're like, no, I'm fine now, everything's great, and then something changes and you slip up, it's okay to fall back down that hole again because you've got the tools to get out. It's right on the back of another cheesy quote with some brie. Even if you run into a storm, there's always a way out no matter how bleak things seem. I think that's Vice from Skies of Arcadia. I made these slides ages ago, I can't remember which games these quotes are from, but I really, really like that one because it goes well with the one before. There's always a way out. The whole world can't be covered in a storm. So let's talk about roles and responsibilities. To conceptualize this, again, this is PowerPoint not being my friend, as I made it in Keynote. I like to use Super's life space theory, which is a quite niche psychological theory about where we spend our time and what roles and responsibilities we are fulfilling at any one point. So in Super's life space theory, he describes having roles and theatres. Your role is the part that you're playing at any one time, and the theatre is the part that you're playing it in. So, for example, I've put like a generic thing there, but for me, I'm Jen, and when I'm at work, I'm Dr. Jen, and I behave completely differently to when I'm at home or when I'm out with my friends. I'm not Dr. Jen anymore. It's a completely different persona. I can behave differently when I'm at home just with my other half to if I'm out with a whole group of friends that I know really well to if I'm at home with my mum and dad. So everything you do is a role in a theatre, and you can have multiple roles going at once. And a really good way to conceptualize that and think about your roles is to write them all down. So, for example, this person is a father and a husband. They're also working full-time as an accountant. They are doing game development on the side. They run a soccer team for their kid. They're a brother and a son and a friend. And then they rate how satisfied they are in that role. Now, I think probably the vast majority of us would have the kind of spouse, parent one, like, you know, highly satisfying, and then the job one, like, way down the other end. And then after that, you put priority levels, and that's where it kind of balances out. So if, for example, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you would label those 1 to 6 for the priority level. And it helps you to quantify how much time you're spending doing one thing, how important it is to you, and how you could improve that. So, for example, you've got to spend like 40 hours a week being an accountant, right? You might as well try and enjoy it if that's how you're going to spend all that time. Self-concept changes over time. Who I am now is not who I'm going to be in 10 years. And who I am in 10 years, I might not even know what was important to me or what is important to me at that point. It's really important to understand that your roles are constantly changing, and that what you plan for yourself now is going to take into account that where you see yourself in 10 years, the things that are important to you will be completely different. So now that we've kind of thought about those different roles and how important they are, you can start to kind of plan them out in a diagrammatic way. I've done this just like, whatever, because it looks nice. But, you could do it as like a graph, like a pie chart, or as an image or whatever. Thinking about how important those different roles are to you and how much satisfaction you get out of them, how much time you spend doing them. And acknowledging that, for example, this person, they're spending only 10% of their time being a game dev, but it's really important to them. It's the second most important thing. And so because that brings them satisfaction, they're going to make sure that they're dedicating time to doing it, and it's not getting put aside in lieu of other things. Similarly, being a brother and a son, spending time with your family, or running the soccer team, spending time with friends. Making sure that you're actually including those because they're important to you. Those roles are something that brings you satisfaction, and they need time and space. And Super's life space theory looks like this. It's a rainbow, apparently, that goes through a variety of stages. You go growth, exploration, establishment, maintenance, and decline. And at any one time, you're going to be playing multiple roles within these stages. And there's environmental factors that feed back in and will affect how your self-concept has changed and how you're achieving it. And there's no, you should do this or you should do that. It's just things to consider and ways you could conceptualize yourself at any one time and where you want to be. Walking the middle path is a really, really great tool that we use in DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. It's a very well-established psychological therapy that we give mostly to teenagers. But I think that it's useful for everybody. Walking the middle path describes the fact that every decision that a person makes is a combination of their logical mind and their emotional mind working together to make that one decision. Some people are hyper logical, and they only do things with their logical mind, and they don't let emotion feed into it at all. Some people are super emotional and can't see reason. And the way that we become wise, we have a wise mind, is that we acknowledge that both of these decision makers are taking part in a decision, and then we put them together and try to find that common middle ground between the two. And that's a wise decision. So, for example, your decision might be, what shall I have for dinner tonight? And you're like, well, I really want a Macca's because it tastes good and I'm lazy and they now deliver it to my house. But your logical mind is like, no, you can't do that. You need to eat really healthy every day. You need to have your 5 portions of fruit and veg and drink 2 litres of water, and you're not going to get all that with the Macca's. You have to be super healthy all the time. So the middle ground is, well, Macca's makes me happy and I want it, but too much is too much, so I'll only have it on Saturday. That's a really simple example. Another example would be, should I quit my job? The logical mind is saying, no, that's, you've got security, you're getting paid, you've got these bills to pay, you should definitely stay there. And then your emotional mind is like, I am literally not coping with this at all. I can't keep going in and doing this every day. I hate it. Everybody hates me. blah, 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 and all these kind of really automatic negative thoughts. And then the middle ground is, well, perhaps you could reduce your work hours. Perhaps you could take a holiday. Perhaps you could ask your boss for your role to be changed. That's the wise mind in the middle of the two. Obviously, these are like hugely, stereotypical examples, but every decision you make, you could just stop and think about this. Which mind is making this decision? Is it my logical brain or my emotional brain? And how could I take both into account? So we'll do a bit of CBT as well. This is a really powerful tool for anyone to have at any stage ever. Understanding the difference between thoughts and feelings. And this sounds super basic and it sounds like I'm talking down to you guys, and I'm sorry if you know this already, but it is like 101 of CBT, and it is one of the most powerful things that you could ever really learn. Thoughts are concepts or even fully formed sentences. You could spell them out, you could write them down. A thought is something that occurs in your brain consciously and you're aware of it, and it's usually a sentence or a word like, for example, I'm angry, or I can't do this. Whereas the feeling is actually a completely different thing, and it's sometimes very hard to describe. It's something that happens throughout your entire body. You might feel it in your stomach, you might feel it in your brain. It might just feel like a big rush of anything. Your feelings come from your lizard brain, the amygdala that we talked about earlier. It's the part of the brain that was developed so that we would know to be scared of stuff, or know that this is my mate and I need to protect that person because, offspring and evolution and stuff. They're different things. They are completely different things. A thought might come into your head saying, I can't do this, I'm terrible, I'm awful. And then that makes you feel worthless. It makes you feel sad, depressed. You can challenge that thought as it happens so that you don't feel that emotion. When you learn to do that, you become so empowered. And that's the basis of CBT, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Something will happen, an event. And so, for example, me coming into this lecture theatre, I could be like, oh, God, I don't feel prepared for this talk, or why am I being trusted to give all these facts to these people? And then I feel anxious or scared even. And then I might not do the talk, or I might fuck it up, or I might get told that I'm not allowed to pace up and down the room and then stand behind the lectern like a wally. But actually, as soon as those thoughts come into my head, I'm like, well, no, I am qualified to be here, and maybe this isn't the best advice that anyone could receive, but it's better than nothing. And, this room is full of people, so these people clearly want to know about this stuff. And then those feelings of worthlessness and hopelessness just go away. And, you start to feel like, yeah, there's a bit of anxiety, but yeah, I could do this. This will be fun. I'll enjoy this. And it's a lot more fulfilling. And it was really simple to just know that thought was happening and then just challenge it straight away. And that's one of the things you can do in mindfulness, because you become so aware of your own thoughts. You become so aware because you're concentrating really hard and you're trying not to have them, which is not how it's supposed to be. You just accept them. But you can start to really conceptualize your own thoughts as sentences and start to think, well, is that true, what I just thought? Learning to not trust your own thoughts is actually terrifying. It's really, really, really scary, because if you can't trust what you're thinking, how can you function on a day-to-day basis? But unfortunately, our brains lie to us. And once you realize that and you're like, you dumb brain, why are you saying that stuff? You just make a joke out of it. Oh, like, that's anxious Jen talking. Oh, no, that's fine. That's not true. The world seems a lot more easy to deal with. And that's just an example of the entire cycle occurring. But I already did it, so don't worry about it. Oh, did you want to take a picture? I can go back. And because I wanted to relate this to games and not just like a mental health 101 that could be given to any group of people ever, I wanted to really talk about how, as a games industry and how, as employers, we can foster an environment that is actually healthy for the people that work with it. And there's a name for that. It's the opposite of burnout. It's called engagement. And there's, like, if you Google it, you'll get all of these, you know, you could pay $99 to come and attend my seminar about having an engagement in your workforce, and then your productivity will improve, and also, where's your money, please? But actually, you can really just introduce like a few simple stuff into your workplace, or you can suggest to your boss that these get introduced. And they don't have to cost anything, and they don't have to, stop people from working. It just will come together to make a workplace that is actually producing what it's supposed to produce at the timeline it's supposed to produce it, and that your employees are happy people and they want to come to work. So a few of the suggestions that I had to deal specifically with game dev problems like crunch and burnout and, you know, the constant creative pressure and game dev blues and things like that. Have a curfew. Even if you don't promote crunch in your workplace, people might still be doing it and you didn't even know, because you've got this deadline, or they're just super anxious, they're perfectionists. Be like, no. Lights out at 6 p.m, then you go home. You're not allowed to stay here after that. I'm locking the door. Have a curfew. Encourage autonomy. One of the biggest predictors of people being burned out and depressed at work is that they feel like they're not in control. It's huge up there in causes for depression. People just feeling like, I don't have a say, I'm completely out of control in my working environment. Ask people what they need. How could I help you? How could I improve the situation for you here? What would you like to do? Even in a creative direction, do you have suggestions for what we could do here? Like, put people on the spot. Be like, okay, I want you to know that you have an influence, you have a say. They might not really have a say, but if they feel like they do, they will be better employees, more productive. Manage your resources well. It sounds super simple, but people get stressed out when they don't have enough stuff to do what you're telling them to do. Ask them if they have enough stuff to do what you're telling them to do. You know, or if you're the employer, your boss might not even know that you don't have enough time for this, or you don't have the software that you need, or you don't have the team, the numbers, the expertise. Ask for the resources to actually do the job you've been asked to do. Ensure consistency. Teams function better when people aren't going in and out, and burnout can lead to incredibly increased employee turnover, as well as the fact that the games industry is ridiculous in terms of like having no job security at all. Teams constantly change. Try to keep the same people together. The more people work together, the more they'll trust each other and the less anxiety they'll have about the product that they're creating. Check in with people. Ask, are you okay? How are you doing? It doesn't have to be the boss to the employee. It could just be two employees to each other. Hey, what's up? Are you all right? And people usually go, yep. When you say, are you okay? People are like, yep, I'm guilty of this, like all the time. I usually ask twice. You okay? Yep. Yeah, but like, are you okay? Because like I'm actually checking. I'm not just being polite. I want to know. The answer is almost always different. Because it might be, yeah, I'm all right. Or it might be, no, this fucking sucks. And I hate it and I just want to kill myself. And you have now uncovered something that no one else had uncovered because you asked if you were okay. Ask twice. Really, really, really powerful. Try it out with a friend or a colleague and see what happens. Validate your team, whether that's you validating your boss, or you're a boss and you're validating your employee, or you're all just validating each other. Yes, ideally this would be actually paying people for overtime. If that's not possible, which unfortunately it often isn't, actually say to someone, you did a good job and I was really happy with what you did. If you have criticism, maybe save it for another time. Just have like a dedicated time where you're like, well done, thank you, I appreciated that. It's so powerful to hear that you did a good job, because often we don't tell ourselves that we did a good job. our brains are like, you did adequately, or you could have done better, or all you can see is the flaws, particularly when you're a game dev and you've been working on one project for 3 years and you know exactly how every small part of it looks or is supposed to look or functions or is supposed to function, to the point that you can't actually see it as a game anymore. It's now just lines of code. Someone saying, I like this thing that you've done, I think it's good for X, Y, and Z, is one of the most powerful things you can do. I think it's Google that have started telling their employees that for 1 day a week they want them to do something for themselves, and apparently their productivity increased by like 40%. Give people show them that you trust them to be like, hey, you can go do what you want. We might use it, we might not, that's no problem. Just do what you want. Sounds like a waste of time and money, but it's not, because actually the rest of the time they work better. And it's an interesting test to see what people can do when you actually just take off the restrictions. Have an open door policy. If you're managing a group of people, they need to know that they can come to you with anything. It's one of the ways that we can introduce intervention early if there's a problem in the team. Write a mental health procedure. If you need help with that, Checkpoint exists. It's kind of what we do. If there's a procedure, something that people can follow, if you're feeling X, then do Y. This is how we support you. This is when you need to go get help. Like, list it out in bullet points, because it helps people to just be like, oh, A, they care. That's really important. People feel very valued when they know that their employer cares about them. But also, it might help them to recognize things that they previously hadn't recognized, or it might help them to actually find an avenue to seek help when they didn't know how to get it before. It's actually really easy to do. It's not intimidating at all to just have a mental health procedure. You have a physical health procedure, right? Like you have OH&S, don't lift this heavy box because you'll get back pain. Why are we not doing that for mental health? It's as important, and it costs the economy more. And develop a referral system. Find some clinicians in your area or some services in your area that are trusted, that understand tech, that understand the pressures of working in tech. If someone's like, hey, I think I need to see a psychologist, first thing they need to go to their GP. But then if you have like a list of psychologists or a list of services, of clinics that could help people, it actually gives someone an option, whereas before it was just way too varied and they had no idea. And when to seek help. If you feel life isn't worth living, if you're having physical symptoms like you're losing weight or not sleeping, if you're not actually functioning anymore, so like you're, shirking your responsibilities, if you've tried self-help and it hasn't worked, or the most important one, if you want to, why wait until things go wrong, like super wrong, before getting help? Why not go ahead right now and just be like, I'll talk to someone because I've been struggling and I'm not depressed, I'm not anxious, and I've not got any diagnosable problem, but things could be better. Just reach out. If you didn't know, you can get 10 sessions with a psychologist in Australia for free every year on Medicare. If you haven't used them this year, you could use them in the next 3 months and then get 10 more in January. So you can have 20 sessions with a psychologist in a 2-month period or 3-month period or however often you want it to be. Not many people know that. You have to go to your GP and get a mental health care plan, but you should know that. It's important. So we did the 3-step model. We inspected, we accepted, we learned how to act. And this is a really tenuous analogy, and thank you for bearing with me. But at the beginning, I showed you a screen from Zork that said you're in a maze of twisty passages all alike, and you had no idea where to go or what to do. Hopefully this is what that scene looks like now. You have a map, you know what room each direction will take you, how many steps it will take you till you get to the end. Yes, it's still a long road, and yes, this is a really, really lame analogy. But I think it's a really powerful visual representation of that mental health journey and going from one step to another. And the last cheesy quote. So this is Maura from Fallout 3. She says, no, it's like, did you ever try to put a broken piece of glass back together, even if the pieces fit, you can't make it the way it was before. But if you're clever, you can still use the pieces to make other useful things, maybe even something wonderful like a mosaic. And that's the talk. Thanks, guys. Questions? Go ahead.
I was wondering if you had any opinions around rational emotive behavior therapy as a structured framework for CBT.
I have no opinions about that because I don't know what it is. I'm a doctor, so I do a lot with drugs, and I'm still learning about psychological therapies, but I could read up on it and get back to you. I don't know if Jane has any...
I didn't catch it actually. What was the name of it?
Rational emotive behavior therapy?
Yeah, no, still.
I'll read up on it. Thank you for informing me about that. Sorry. No. Go ahead.
So I teach video game development
Mm-hmm.
to large groups of students,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm always stricken between trying to find that balance between getting them ready for an industry that's going to abuse them, and wanting to make sure they're physically and psychologically okay, and actually achieving something that will bring them out. I never know where to find that balance. I mean, we do game jams, which really are just a simulation of a punch because it's a business. But
That's tough.
Any thoughts on helping students?
Yeah, look, we already work with AIE and SAE, so we're in the early planning stages of developing that sort of workshop. But I've been chatting with the CEOs of both. To develop a workshop that could be just a few hours long, where we go in and we actually do something similar to this, where we give like people tools that they can think about themselves and think about how to look after themselves. Because you're right, like there is an industry that's going to systematically try and destroy them. But if that's what you want to do and that's what you're passionate about, there's no reason you shouldn't do it. You know, you could say the same thing about medicine. Being a doctor is at times soul-destroying, but I love it to pieces. It's just important to know yourself and know what's going to break you down, and then just make sure that it doesn't happen. So, yeah, I mean, there's some business cards here. Get in touch with us. We'd love to help out in any way we can. I think starting a conversation is a really important first step. Anyone? No? Is Matthew Lee in this room?
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Matthew made a donation to Checkpoint today, quite a big one, and I just wanted to say thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Great. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for coming.